June 1892. The village of Necochea near Buenos Aires, Argentina. Police are called to the home of a young mother. A terrible tragedy has taken place.
Francisca Rojas had 2 children. She said that she came home from work and saw a man leaving. Went inside and found her 2 children are killed.
And Francisca Rojas tells police she knows exactly who the man was. Her lover, Pedro Velasquez.
She basically said that Velasquez had it in for her, that he had threatened to kill her children if she didn't marry him.
Police waste no time in tracking down Velasquez. And in this era, there's one tried and true method for closing a case. Work the suspect over until he confesses.
And the questions apparently weren't very polite. They beat on him. They tortured him. That was kind of the way it was.
For 3 days, Velasquez takes the worst the police dish out.
They even waterboarded him. There's a thing they call submarining, where they would stick you under the water. And still he would not confess to this crime.
Not even close. Which leaves Inspector Eduardo Alvarez wondering, what if there's some other way to determine whether Velasquez is guilty or not?
He didn't like that type of interrogation. He didn't think it was worthwhile. And he was looking for some other method to prove or disprove that doesn't require hitting somebody in the head.
Alvarez went to the crime scene looking for any evidence that might indicate what had happened.
He searches the cramped living quarters, looking for any clue that police may have overlooked. He finds nothing. Until his eyes are drawn to the frame of the door.
What he found was a bloody fingerprint. He had talked with Rojas, and she had said that when she came there and found her children, she did not touch the children. She didn't touch anything in the house. She just fled.
Which can only mean one thing.
Whoever left this print was probably the killer.
Alvarez is no anatomy expert, but he wonders, could he match this fingerprint to the suspect's hand? It's a revolutionary idea, and at this moment, it's impossible to know if it will even work.
There weren't any development techniques, no dusting, no fingerprint cameras like we have today. And so he did the best thing that he could. He cut the door frame out.
Comparing a fingerprint from a crime scene to that of a suspect in police custody had never been done before. A revolutionary idea with a surprising outcome.
He realized that whoever left this print there was the killer, because no one had touched the bodies and the blood afterwards.
While Alvarez had the critical insight that this could be possible, he does not have the science background to test his theory. Fortunately, he knows someone who does. His friend and mentor, Juan Vucetich.
Vucetich was an interesting guy because he was not only a police officer, he was an anthropologist. So he was kind of at the nexus between law enforcement and science.
Vucetich had been studying fingerprints for years.
He had understood that they were individual, that they didn't change through life, that they were valuable pieces of information for identity.
But this was scientific research, not detective work.
The possibility had been discussed hypothetically in the literature. However, at that point, fingerprints had never been used before to identify a criminal.
And there's a problem. At this time, no tools exist to do this task. There's no established methodology, no example to follow. The next step is to take a copy of the suspect's fingerprints, the only way they know how.
The method used to take the inked fingerprints, fundamentally the same as we use today. A thin film of ink, the finger rolled across the inked surface and then rolled onto a piece of paper with boxes for each finger separately.
They took all 10 digits. Well, only one was in play because they had a single fingerprint.
Vucetich spends hours studying the two prints, ridge by ridge, trying to match dots, bifurcations, and ridge endings. He's looking for these characteristics to match up in the same location and in the same arrangement. But the more he looks, the more he realizes the fingerprints don't match.
This fingerprint in blood was not Velasquez's fingerprint.
Well, if it wasn't his print there in the blood, there was nothing else to tie him to that crime scene.
The police are stunned. If the print wasn't left there by Pedro Velasquez, then whose is it? And horrifying as it might seem, the only other person they know was at the scene is the murdered children's mother, Francisca Rojas.
Mrs. Rojas' statement basically put only two people at the crime scene, her and Velasquez, who she was accusing of the murder of her two babies.
Since there were two people involved in this dance, who else are you going to turn to?
Investigators bring Francisca Rojas back in for questioning.
But she stuck to her story that she didn't have anything to do with it.
All Inspector Alvarez has to do to know if she's lying is compare her print to the one from the scene.
Mrs. Rojas had said, Velasquez did it. I saw him run away.
But this time, science gets the final say. And when they compare the prints, they're a perfect match. This mother of two killed her own children and pointed the finger at an innocent man, her one-time boyfriend.
They confronted her with this evidence, and they said, you know, this proves that you are lying. You did have contact. It is your print. So she confessed to the crime.
For the first time ever, police used fingerprints to identify a murder suspect. And the killer turned out to be the victim's own mother. But there's still one question. Why would Mrs. Rojas kill her own children? It turns out the man she accused of the murders was not her only lover. She had another one, and she'd do anything to keep him.
The truth was, the gentleman that she was seeing said he would marry her if she didn't have children. So she killed her children so she wouldn't be encumbered and she can go off with her lover.
Thanks to a single bloody print, Francisca Rojas is sentenced to life in prison, and a new era in crime fighting has begun. Juan Vucetich revolutionized crime fighting by establishing a scientific system for comparing and analyzing the arches, loops, and whorls that make up a fingerprint. He was the first person ever to make a fingerprint identification in a criminal case.